Welcome to the Center of Light Radio with spiritual teacher, intuitive, musician, composer, and best-selling author of The Divine Principle, Anchoring Heaven on Earth, your host, Keith Anthony Blanchard.
Coast to coast, pole to pole, all around the world. Thanks to the marvel of technology. I'm coming at you live from a little guest house in Memphis, Tennessee. This is Keith Anthony Blanchard, and you're listening to Center of Light Radio, Center of Divine Unfoldment and Reinforcement, radio for the soul and the transformation station. I hope everyone had a wonderful eclipse day today. I didn't get the glasses. I decided to look directly at the sun. I played Daryl Brand for a little while, but I realized that, you can use your phone. Just tilt your phone. So all those going to wait around for the next 40 or 80, whatever years it's going to take for this thing to come back around in its ellipsis, its orbit. Remember, you can use your cell phone. Couple of announcements real quick. I'm still hosting the fundraiser for Kenneth Pass, recent guest on Center of Light Radio, who wants to get back to Arizona. We want to raise some money for him to get him on a bus so he can find an artifact that when he was abducted many years ago as a young boy on a camping trip, he and a few others, including some chaperones, were taken back 10,000 years. And Kenneth swears that the petroglyph that you see on Prophecy Rock is him 10,000 years ago. So while he was on this craft with these aliens, he said one of them really upset him. So he took a piece of their powerful technology and hid it. And he wants to go back to Arizona, I believe it is. And he wants to recover this technology. And he wants to bring it to the Hopi and the Pueblo, because he says, Kenneth says, that they would know what to do with this technology. So you go to centeroflightradio.com. Once the page settles, you'll see a flying saucer. Well, of course, right under the flying saucer, you'll see a donate button. If you got some change in your pocket, send it this way so we can get Kenneth out to Arizona and back on Center of Light Radio for part 2. So he can tell us what went down during his visit to recover this artifact and hanging out with the Native Americans over there in the West. Also, to dial into the show today, dial 888-919-2355. That's 888-919-2355. This divine man right here, Swamiji Visvayogi, is going to be coming back to Memphis. And I think this is the third week of September. I'm going to be interviewing him again. Please stay tuned for this most amazing, powerful interview. And it's going to be videoed as well. Swamiji's tour for this year is Healing the Earth by Purifying the Waters. So you can bet I'm going to be asking him questions like Fukushima, the BP oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, is it still leaking? Fluoride in the water. Flint, Michigan, all these things associated with water and the healing of the earth by making such water purified. I think it's time to get down to Center of Light Radio business. Again, as I said, dial 888-919-2355 to speak to myself or my guest today, who happens to be Dan Hoquist, and we will be speaking about the Solstice connection. Author, researcher, theorist, amateur archaeologist Dan Hoquist became a seeker of truth and sometimes finder. At a very early age, introduced to various world religions, he took the path of true skeptic and walked in the moccasins of the people. Now he seeks to share knowledge gained by experience and the wisdom of more learned in hopes that others will follow, and by passing before, make an easier path for others to follow. Discovered Nazca-type lines and geoglyphs on and around the Marfa, Texas plateau during the summer of 2015 after trying in vain to gain public awareness through regular channels such as Texas Archaeology Society, and even by speaking directly with the Anthropology and Archaeology Department of Texas State University, realized that nothing was going to happen, just nothing was going to happen if I did not get personally involved. Dan's devotion to the truth was validated in April 2016 by a flyover and a photographic evidence was taken, and now it is made available to all. Welcome to Center of Light Radio, my friend Dan Hoquist.
Well, thank you, Keith. You know that Center of Light is my weekly positive recharge station. I'm honored to be a guest here. Everybody in chat knows me as dondanl, and you'll find that my website is dondanl.com. My YouTube is under that same name, dondanl, Dan Hoquist, and you can find me at Facebook at Dan Hoquist. I'm making my research available at all three of these sites. My first book is America's Electric Nazca, Megalithic Marfa, Texas. And that was regarding a discovery I made regarding Stonehenge. When I was doing a backyard project, I have a habit of research and study anytime I'm doing anything, and I wanted to get it right. So upon research, at the same time, they had found elongated skulls in the Stonehenge area. This was rather unusual because I happened to be listening to a Zachariah Sitchin lecture from way back, and he said that the Anunnaki called themselves children of the sun. I had an epiphany that the Stonehenge monument was actually made by these Anunnaki, the children of the sun. And if you'll notice, when you look at the Stonehenge blueprint monument, there's only one path for the sun to enter at any time of the year, and that happens to be on the summer solstice. This is when they were harvesting the sun. But because I was interested in my area, I tried to do an overlay of my area, which is the San Gorgonio Pass. The San Gorgonio Pass is like a semicircular structure or area that actually separates the inland area of California, Southern California, from the desert areas. And we have two almost 12,000 foot mountains on either side with a valley cut between, and this is us, the pass. This came in to my regard when I noticed that the summer solstice actually passed through what appeared to be a notch in the ridge of the mountain line. So I tried to overlay the Stonehenge blueprint over my area, but the lines just didn't work. They took me farther west and even farther west until I actually got to the coast of Southern California and Santa Catalina Island. And this is an island, part of the Channel Islands group, that is about 20 miles off the coast. When I started researching this, I found that it was called Stonehenge Island in the past. And because I was working with Stonehenge, this seemed rather unusual. So I looked into it. Dr. Furstanan, he is a German naturalist from the late 1800s. He was working down in Mexico with the Aztec mythology and came across a story of noble giants living on Santa Catalina. And so he made his way back up to California and out to Catalina Island, where he discovered that the rock outcroppings along the outer part of the island itself coincided with everything that Stonehenge has. And as a matter of fact, quite a few of these stones were removed, but one still exists in Long Beach, and you can actually get a regular transit out to Santa Catalina Island from Long Beach area. But it is a rock carving of a boat. And in solar religions, ancient solar religions, which were the first religions in the world, the sun boat stands as a source for almost every one of them.
Wow.
This includes the Vikings. It includes Indians. So the solar boat would carry the sun. Often it'd be a chariot too, back in Greece, Apollo with the chariot. And really, when I decided to overlay Catalina, that's when I decided I would start following the solstice line to see where it would lead me. And this line led directly to the Grand Canyon, which
wow.
It is a very important site for at least 7 different indigenous tribes.
You know, Dan, I saw the video you put up a few weeks ago, how these lines. They land directly on these hot spots, to use the word, all around the world. Let me ask you, when you started coming into the feet of the epiphany of where this was going and how it's unfolding, what did it feel like to be you, the wow factor? What was happening, the dynamic inside of you as you seen us all becoming to a state of manifestation?
I was shocked, and really, if it weren't for very an amazing experiencer named Alan, I felt so brave to come on and interview a traumatic event. But he did it because he wanted to pass knowledge on. And I decided at that point, my paradigm shifted. I needed to bring this out into the public. And so I began to do YouTube videos while trying to contact different archaeologists, different schools, etc. But the amazing thing about this line from Catalina to the Grand Canyon, exactly, from that point, it crosses over a place called Navajo Mountain, and then it continues on towards the East Coast. This line actually crosses exactly over a place in Wisconsin where Inception Radio is out of. Wisconsin is actually famous for the amount of effigy and burial mounds that colonists came across when they started colonizing this country. I came across an anecdotal story about what happened to bones. They found giant bones all over Wisconsin. 18 were found in one area near Lake Denton. Some of the farmers had actually decided that it was too much trouble to notify people, so they would actually ground up the bones and spread them across their fields, thinking it would increase their product. Well, it didn't, but they ended up destroying most of the mounds. One still exists because it actually includes a step pyramid. It's called Fort Aztalan, and Fort Aztalan, Wisconsin, is set up in an Orion's Belt type situation where the step pyramid was actually uncovered back in the early 1800s. It was actually reburied later in history because the indigenous people basically won the right to recover it. But they found it was a step pyramid that looks exactly like Aztec pyramids in Mexico. This line crosses exactly over the apex of this pyramid in the center of that Orion's Belt setup. From there, it crosses into Lake Michigan. Lake Michigan has recently been found, I think 2015 also, that there were pyramids in the water of Lake Michigan. That's amazing to me. But it continues on across towards Mount Washington and then into Nova Scotia, where it crosses a very peculiar place called Oak Island. And it doesn't just cross any area, it crosses over what they call the money pit of Oak Island. This Oak Island is treasure seekers' paradise. This has been tried. They've been trying to discover a lost treasure there, or something that they consider a treasure in and around the Oak Island area for well over a couple hundred years. It's linked to the Templars. It's linked to Blackbeard the pirate. It's linked to everybody except giants. But when I continued this line past the Oak Island area, it exits at a place that doesn't have a name. It is an island that looks exactly like a giant footprint. And the giant footprint is not the only thing there. In the water, I found what appears to be an underwater submerged vehicle. In the waters off of Nova Scotia, And let me see if I can bring this
What
up.
kind of vehicle are you referring to? An
It's a
automobile or
rectangular underwater submerged vehicle, and it has these bright spiraling type motors and what appears to be lights on it. But the area that this is all taking place in is near Shag Harbor. And if you remember, Shag Harbor was a famous UFO incident back in the 1960s. The government got involved, and they had tracked this object under the water and finally lost it as they were looking for it with submerged vehicles. This brought into mind the map that Phil Schneider used to lecture with. And if you don't remember Phil Schneider, he was a geoengineer who worked with the government doing deep underground military bases, or DUMBs. But the main line that he was talking about crossed the United States at exactly the same parallel as this Solstice line. So I had a little validation from Catalina to Shag Harbor that this is what is below. And if you remember the Egyptian saying, as above, so below, this was also validated by aerial archaeologists or people like me using Google Earth to discover things. They had found an entrance under the Malibu coastline, a huge entrance. So really, you know, by just evidence of possibility, this actually validates one another. The Solstice line, the line that Phil Schneider drew as a main tunnel crossing the United States underneath the land. But that's not all. In 2017, I was able to validate this very uniquely. I was watching the weather report, and if you'll remember, in January, California ended its drought by a massive amount of rain. Well, the local newsrooms had increased the visibility of their Doppler radar, and by doing so, their topographical maps became much better, more clear, and actually representative of what is actually the land here in Southern California. What I saw was a straight line cutting across from San Clemente and the Channel Islands to the Grand Canyon. This is a regular, perfectly straight trenching that occurs from the Grand Canyon to San Clemente Island. And you can see this from space. It rivals the Great Wall of China. As far as I'm concerned, it's 450 miles long, dead straight, and it's impossible. And by that I mean this trench crosses at least 2 mountain peaks and 2 continental tectonic plates to make its way precisely to the Grand Canyon. And that's not all. It crosses the 2 tectonic plates at a point here in the San Gorgonio Pass. And I had thought that this area was something special, when I started doing following these lines and researching them, but I was not aware that I was going to be validated like this. The San Andreas Fault travels from
Right.
the San Francisco Bay Area, and it ends here in the San Gorgonio Pass. Even though seismologists have tried to trace it beyond, it does not exist past the San Gorgonio Pass.
Dan,
And-
let me interrupt you,
Yeah,
sir. Looking at these images, and they're fantastic, and I would love to get those slides from you at some point so we can archive this and make it a really nice package for other listeners that's going to be chiming onto this phenomenal, interesting broadcast that you have, sir. But I want to make sure, because the monitor source that I'm looking at is sort of small, so I can't really tell. Are these lines that you metaphorically drew from point A to point B, or are you saying these are actual lines? And I heard you say the one about that rivals the Chinese.
In 2015, I discovered that all of the megaliths are actually connected via solstice lines, both winter and summer solstice.
Understood.
And they're interchangeable, actually, because when you take a summer solstice line across the world, it changes into a winter solstice line about halfway. So each is equally as important. But that discovery led to the first book, America's Electric Nazca, because of the discoveries I made from following solstice lines. But in 2017, this is an actual geological anomaly. This is a perfectly straight, regularly sized trenching all the way 450 miles, perfectly straight from the San Clemente area to the Grand Canyon itself. And I couldn't find any traces of it beyond, but it's perfectly situated to the peak of Navajo Mountain beyond the Grand Canyon. So I believe that Navajo Mountain is involved too. That makes this even more impossible, because this particular line, this geologic anomaly, actually allows the summer solstice sun, the sunrise, to occur in 3 places at one time in 2 different time zones, because the peak of Navajo Mountain is about 11,000 foot plus. When you get into the area where the trenching crosses into the pass area, that is called Kitching Peak, and where that crosses is about 7,000 foot. As you continue, this trench is regular, about 2 miles wide, and I'm not sure how deep, because the topographical maps don't quite show depth, but that because of the alignment, it allows the summer solstice sun to rise over the exact peak of the Navajo Mountain and be the sunrise sun at the Grand Canyon, at Kitching Peak, and at Santa Catalina Island, all at one time. The real importance about Santa Catalina can't be judged just by this line, because back when it was called Stonehenge Island, they had started discovering giant skeletons, and they dug up about 3,700 on Santa Catalina Island itself.
Wow.
And you have to think, this was when Dr. Furstanan and a guy named Ralph Glidden got together during 1919 to 1928. They dug up 3,700 giant skeletons, all ranging from the smallest was about 7.5 foot to the tallest was about 10 foot. Jeez. Yeah. And Furstanan had originally dug up a skeleton in Avalon Bay itself, which is a semicircular bay. And this particular giant was about 8 foot tall. And he was discovered with artifacts that don't relate to any kind of indigenous Indian or any of that nature. They were unusual finds. This is what the newspaper reported. But they found him with an unusual plaque with strange hieroglyphics. And if you remember, on Oak Island, an exact crossing all the way across the United States, there was also a plaque dug up in the money pit with strange hieroglyphics. Now, I wasn't able to find this particular any pictures of it, so I couldn't put it in my new book. My new book is called The Solstice Connection, and because of all of the new evidence, and I felt that I needed to be very clear about the research. This upcoming book called The Solstice Connection is detailed how I discovered this and why it matters, why they use the solstice lines. But let me go back to the Channel Islands. There were giant skeletons dug up on every one of the Channel Islands. Now, San Clemente is actually owned by the Navy. It is a naval resource. And when I continued that particular line direct into the trenching from the Grand Canyon, it actually crosses over an underwater area that's perfectly rectangular except for a small point on top, and it might be a pyramid. This line crosses exactly over that point. I'm just blown away. But where it crosses the San Gorgonio Pass is even more impossible. It crosses the San Andreas Fault. The San Andreas Fault ends at Kitching Peak. Kitching Peak is perfectly situated to take the energy from the San Andreas Fault and extend it around the mountain instead of allowing a straight line fault to exist. And if you look at the seismic maps from 2016, it shows an area of absolutely no seismic activity. And that's unusual for Southern California to have any area without seismic activity. 150-mile area exists with no seismic activity because the seismic energy released from the San Andreas Fault hits Kitching Peak, and then it's transferred both on a north and south basis around the mountain. It does not allow earthquakes to continue. And the thing is, this line, this trenching, the erosion on it shows an age of probably anywhere from 20 to 50,000 years. And I judge that simply by the erosion. Even more shocking is when I started to look closely at the land under this line, directly under the line. I realized that there were no more than a couple of thousand people who've grown up along this line. It's rather uninhabited because of the mountain ranges that it crosses until you get into Banning. This line crosses into the pass area and crosses into Old Town Banning. I grew up about 100 feet from the center of this line.
Dan, and we're at the bottom of the hour. Would you give out your contact information? I'm really just here absorbing this new information. Would you give out your contact information so everyone knows how to find more about you and this awesome discovery that you have? Then I got a question I want to put to you, sir.
And you can find all of this on a related video series that I've just started called The Solstice Connection. This particular one with Catalina is The Solstice Connection Part 1, and that's at Dan Hoquist on my YouTube. I've also placed it on my Facebook page, Dan Hoquist, and on my website, dondanl-dan.com. I hope that everybody goes there and takes a look. I'm going to try to be consistent with this upcoming book and this new series. It's going to be ongoing with all the new discoveries I make.
What does your colleagues, people in the same field that you've talked to about this, how are they receiving this? What are their thoughts about all this? Are they wild, or some of them don't like the fact that you discovered it and they didn't? I mean,
this is what I'm getting from other ancient alien theorists, is that it's unless they make the discovery themselves, it's very hard, because I guess that they've positioned themselves into an authoritative role where they're supposed to know everything.
I'm familiar with that in the field of work that I do. There's a clique, and if you're not grandfathered into the clique, or somehow your being in the clique doesn't make their light shine a little brighter, it's hard to get into that locked door.
It's unfortunate, but
yeah, it is.
This is not for me. This is knowledge for the sake of knowledge. And I know that, there's not a whole lot of money in this. This is simply for everyone's benefit. I want people to use this knowledge, because if the Anunnaki are involved, then you're looking at gold. Okay? And come to find out that each of these solstice lines connects all these temples and shrines to at least one pyramidal section or structure. And I could only figure out two reasons for that. And one is communication, and the other is transportation. Communication isn't a real viable solution, because you can actually have radio waves that span the globe, especially if you don't have any interference. But I figured that this was a transportation. They were transporting gold, and they needed these straight lines because of the mass effect of gold. It weighs a lot.
How are they transporting this gold?
The Anunnaki came from another planet.
Right. I'm familiar with the Citroen stuff as far as the reason they were needing gold, so they can use it in the atmosphere. But when you said gold for the first time, I didn't know if you meant that as a metaphor. This could be gold, meaning like a big discovery, but you meant this literally.
Literally. These are the paths of gold. If you follow the solstice lines from a megalithic structure, you will end up at another megalithic structure. But along the way, you should find something of golden value. And I've validated this, especially through this area in the San Gorgonio Pass. The one set of the mountains is a known cavern system that over 200 pounds of gold were taken out of in 1930s. But more recently, when I started making this public on YouTube, there was a discovery of a $5 million gold discovery here in Southern California that occurred just within a couple of weeks after I released my first video.
Dan, I want you to help me understand something. Okay, so we're talking about these paths of gold, and you said the Anunnaki. But what was the conveyance? How did they move this gold all the way across these great distances? Did they do it by chariots? I mean, you said Anunnaki. Did they pick it up themselves?
They had flying craft. And
so I'm trying to put that together with the straight lines. If they have flying craft, you think they'd just pick it up and zip, and they'd be there in a few minutes or whatever. But are you saying that that's the exact? They actually linearly flew in that direction.
Exactly. This is they actually use straight lines. And a guy named Aimé Michel, a Frenchman, back in the 1959. When the UFO events started really happening in the present time, he discovered that these UFO craft were following a straight line pattern from round structures throughout the world.
I see now it's deliberate.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's
right. Okay.
absolutely deliberate.
Right.
And my new book, The Solstice Connection, actually details this. Why they used the solstice lines was, well, they didn't have longitude and latitude. And if you think about this, the Piri-Reis map, which is dated about 1513, comes from much older sources, according to the person who drew up the Piri-Reis map. What it has are these basically solar rayed areas that start from a central point and ray outward. And it starts at the Great Pyramid of Giza. And I discovered that when I was studying Stonehenge itself, that the Arthurian myth had giants building Stonehenge, giants from Africa, by the way. They originally built it apparently on Mount Kilauros in Ireland, and then later, because the king that Merlin served couldn't move the structure, Merlin moved the structure to where it is now. But the archaeologists date this story about to the 5th century. When I started really studying the solstice lines and how people navigated, I came across a story about Pythias, a Greek mariner, who detailed a trip in the 3rd century. So this is before the Arthurian legend, to Stonehenge, and also to the Thule Island system, or the Solomon Island system in Antarctica. So this was not a new place. It was, and in 2015, more discoveries were found around the Stonehenge area when they did detailed underground seismic study. They found up to 15 lower structures. That means that the Stonehenge area has got to be thousands upon thousands of years older than what archaeologists are listing it. And that is not the only thing, because when I took that solstice line from Stonehenge, it took me to a place that they had just discovered in 2015 too. It's called the Superhenge. And this is actually an underground Stonehenge of about 8 or 9 times, maybe 10 times as big as the Stonehenge monument itself.
Dan, as I'm sitting here listening to you talk, it's like discovery after discovery. You're constantly being wowed. How long did it take from when you first started to begin to realize there's something seriously solid here?
When I started discovering the coincidence of giants, and then not only giants, but see, the Channel Islands also had elongated skulls. They were called misshapen skulls back then. And the discovery of elongated skulls around the Stonehenge area tied that to it. So I had already had this consistent validation. It shocked me when I found this, that I was actually brought up on a solstice line that I wrote about in 2016. But not only that, not only that, of the few thousand people that have lived and grown up along this solstice line in California, I think I'm the only one who's been to Kitching Peak. There's only a handful of people who are listed as actually hiking to Kitching Peak. So that's rather unusual too. I seem to be a son of the sun. I seem to be attuned or manipulated, if you will, long term. But this isn't only me. You see, My mother also grew up on the Solstice line, and my father grew up a couple of streets away from where I grew up. And that's within this central area of the Solstice. They went to the same schools. The high school that they went to happens to be a couple of 100 feet from the center of this Solstice line through Banning, California. But my mother actually set the cornerstone of a structure, a new gym that they had built for the high school. She set the cornerstone in a ceremony because she was the salutatorian of her class. The stone is actually on the center of this Solstice line.
Wow.
So
Everything's lining up.
when you think of synchronicity, this is actually impossible.
Yeah.
Because we're dealing with an obviously artificial structure. The channel itself is a megalith because it allows the same sun to show in 3 different areas and 2 different time zones at the same time. And Santa Catalina, if you don't think it's possible, the high elevation on Santa Catalina is about 2,000 feet. The San Gorgonio Pass is about 2,500 feet. So you can see that this all lines up. From Navajo Mountain, the peak of Navajo Mountain itself, the sun rises in 3 different spots in 2 different time zones. That makes this an artificial structure. So what is the synchronicity? Well, there isn't any. It's probably manipulation on a grand scale. And
for what reason? For what reason?
For knowledge. I think it's the right time for this knowledge to actually become public. And this
Dan, is it all because when you said for knowledge? Okay, Dan, you discovered something really, really cool, and people are going to become aware of it. And you're going to keep doing your research, and the doors that open get bigger and greater. But again, the question I pose is, for what reason? You said for knowledge, but for what reason? For us to finally have some evidence that there were others that did this manipulation? Is that the bottom line?
No, I think they look at us something like handicapped siblings. You know, right. and I'm becoming more aware that the Anunnaki, when they were here, were at least a type 1 civilization. We are a type 0. Type 1 civilization controls the energy of their world. A type 2 civilization controls the energy of their whole solar system. So I think these people were actually slipping from a type 1 or ascending to a type 2 civilization at the time, because at some point they stopped needing gold. And this can be seen as the Philosopher's Stone of the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. And this is what alchemists thought the Emerald Tablets of Thoth were. They were actually published in the 6th century in Arabic, which was one of 2 written languages. It's consistent. And the reason that these tablets are actually true is that it mentions Enki, the Sumerian god Enki. Mm-hmm. Over 1,000 years before the libraries of Ur were even discovered. So it's a validation well before we even knew there was cuneiform. And that's amazing.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
Way back.
But Sir Isaac Newton and John Dee, another famous mysticist, they were alchemists also. They were under the opinion that the tablets themselves were the Philosopher's Stone, and that means that they could transmute elements. And the whole thing of alchemy was always the transmutation of lead into gold.
Yeah.
Okay, so gold again. This is, but apparently, the Anunnaki, when they slipped or ascended to this Type 2 civilization, they became more distant, and there are all kinds of stories about different councils actually manipulating the human species, and either by war or by discovery and knowledge, we are somehow being manipulated. And this evidence of the solstice line that I personally am attuned to shows me that I have been walking a path chosen. I could not have made any other choices that would have led me here. I had to do everything exactly in order. My parents are involved. This is absolutely an amazing validation of manipulation. And when you think about that, you think about government and the alien connection there. We haven't improved on the jet engines for 60 years. Are you kidding me? You know, this we actually have patents on anti-gravity dating from the 1950s that are being used in military aircraft right now. The B-2 stealth bomber made it public that they are using a patented in 1954 a anti-gravity technique where they positively charge the leading edge of their wing and negatively charge the return edge of the trailing edge of the wing, and that gives them the ability to fly across the globe without refueling. Have you ever wondered why they don't need to refuel?
No. I thought maybe they were meeting with these tankers up in the air, 20, 40, whatever, 1,000 feet in the air, and they would fuel that way. I never gave it a thought.
And Neutron in the chat room has mentioned Einstein said his discovery had little to do with knowledge, but more with intuition. And there's also stories of Tesla being a possible star child.
Absolutely.
Or, this is rather unusual, but it's validated in me. And the solstice lines, those are validated by themselves. The thing is, it all ties to what is called sacred geometry. And this in particular, it would be the flower of life. The flower of life exists on a stone in the Osiris temple. This stone shows signs of that it has somehow been burnt into, but without any kind of laser or anything. This stone exists today in the Osiris temple. The thing is, when you draw a circle around the Great Pyramid, looking straight down on it, and you encapsulate it from at the base in a circle, and then you circle each face of the Great Pyramid, you are left with the beginning nexus of a flower of life. Wow, amazing. And this, when you the thing that was really a validation was by taking a line from the southeast corner of the Great Pyramid across the apex to the northwest corner of the pyramid, and following that line straight through, it leads into Greece, where a particular mountain is associated with Hermes and Thoth, and this line ends up exactly crossing the altar of Stonehenge. This line continues into Nova Scotia, across Lake Michigan, and crosses the Step Pyramid at Fort Aztalan. It then continues across the Midwest United States, and it crosses a place in southwest Texas, near Marfa, Texas. When I took a winter solstice line by using the blueprint layer over the Grand Canyon itself and using the Grand Canyon as the altar of Stonehenge with the Navajo Mountain as the heel stone, it lined up exactly. By taking a winter solstice line, it meets the winter solstice line from Giza and the Great Pyramid, Stonehenge, the pyramid, a step pyramid at Fort Aztalan, and then it crosses at Marfa, Texas. And if you'll remember, Marfa, Texas is famous for its phantom lights that exist still to this day. I went out there and I found that there are lines similar to Nazca, and they have to be highlighted in order to make sense. So it tells me that this whole area was lit up at one time with an electrical, geological electrical system. And I found that this is actually a hydroelectric system. In Nazca, you'll find channels that run along the lines and the geoglyphs in Nazca. And I believe the same situation occurs here in Marfa, Texas. Those channels, I believe, once you run water up them, actually cause an electric current if you have an acidic aquifer. And if you don't believe that can happen, you can look up starting a fire with a lemon on YouTube.
Right.
Or
right.
You can make electricity in so many ways. But this I found by following a solstice path that led through China and the Gobi Desert in China. There was something unusual that drew me to this one little spot in the Gobi Desert where nothing should be. So I zoomed in, and it's a water plant in the middle of the Gobi Desert. But looking closely, they had dug up these channels alongside these great polygonally marked areas, or their particular lines. They have these channels dug up, and they were forcing water up these channels. At one point, you can see that the water is being charged with electricity somehow. There's nothing there to actually charge it, so it has to be something they're doing with the water itself. As you continue up the channel that they have uncovered, you lose the water, but the electric plasma, a visible electric arcing, continues for hundreds and hundreds of miles. So I have to associate this with both Nazca and the Marfa, Texas area. We just happen to have a real electric ancient engine that still works here in the United States. And if I'm right about Marfa, which I know I am, it becomes the biggest archaeological discovery in North America, just simply by size alone. It's at least a couple of 100 miles. And it continues on into Mexico, slightly into the Chihuahua Desert and the Zona del Silencio. And when I started looking into that, I found that that's connected to the Pyramid of Sun at Teotihuacan. See, that is not a north-facing pyramid. It's actually a solstice-facing pyramid. And when I followed a line across from corner to corner across the apex, it took me into the Chihuahua Desert and a place called Paquime, which is an ancient city that was abandoned strangely. It has at least 4 different styles of building there. And I believe that is a direct association. It's just 50 or so miles away from the Marfa, Texas area.
Dan, we are coming to the top of the hour. What a phenomenal presentation you brought here today, sir. Let me ask you a quick question. When you'd mentioned that either the Anunnaki, they either went down in civilization points or they went up, because when we hear of sightings today, we hear Pleiadians, we hear Greys, we hear the Clarions. We don't really hear about Anunnaki. So I'm agreeing with you. I don't hear about them unless the conversation is usually about Zachariah Sitchin, because I don't hear anything about them visiting us in our night skies. I don't.
Well, I feel that the Anunnaki are probably the only real evidentiary aliens, ET, that we can actually point to. And I'm a big fan of Jim Mars, rest in peace. His school of thought was, just how many alien species does it take to explain everything?
Right. Dan, sadly, we're at the top of the hour. It's coming up very quickly. I appreciate you being a phenomenal guest here on Center Light Radio. So very informative. I don't think I've ever been this quiet for an interview, and I enjoyed every minute of it. Very informative, because I love learning. A lot of the stuff I talk about is usually the same stuff, but differently with different guests. But you was actually able to sit back and just absorb like a sponge. So thank you for being a wonderful presence here, my brother.
You're very welcome. And if you want to see the pictures of my flyover of Texas, go to my YouTube site, dondanl-dan Hoquist, and go to my 7-part series, Texas Electric Nazca. And that will show you my validation of all of these lines that I found. And I really appreciate you inviting me, Keith. It's been a while,
pleasure. Man. You're welcome, sir. It's been a while. I've been wanting to get you for a while. We talked about it for about 2 years. And then finally one day I saw you somewhere in the chat room and I said, it's time. Thank you again, my brother. Hope you have a wonderful night. You know, as this discoveries start to unfold, please keep me informed. We'll make it a part 2, part 3, and ongoingly as you start discovering all these wonderful things that you got your hands involved in.
And I intend on another book. That's all already in the motion. I already have my new book. That will be coming out, The Solstice Connection. You can find me on Facebook at Dan Hoquist, or at dondanl.com, or at dondanl-dan Hoquist on YouTube. I do Twitter also, but not much. I'm more active on YouTube.
And dondanl is DONDANL. DONDANL. Thank you again, my friend. You be well, be safe. Good job.
You're very welcome. Thank you again, Keith.
Yep. Next week on Center of Light Radio, my guest is going to be Heather Boy, and we're going to be talking about, check this out, not only out-of-body experiences, which is cool in and of itself. Heather and her husband, for many years, they have somewhat mastered the art of out-of-body at will. And now they're beginning to dialogue with cosmic forces. They are beginning to dialogue with galaxies in the form of a consciousness. That's going to make for a fantastic show. Keith Anthony Blanchard here every Monday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. You can find me sitting in his chair conducting affairs of the heart, spreading the light, doing what I can to help this world graduate to a better place. Happy solar eclipse day to you. Peace, love, and light. See you soon.
on select